First, good morning. I'm Jim Ellison, Chairman of the Metro Y. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you. Somebody asked me if I was the big pumpkin. And my answer is we're all in the same patch. It's my privilege to not only welcome you, but to confirm our purpose today. And our purpose is a big and heady one, an exciting one that I know will be fun for all of us. We have the opportunity and responsibility to chart a new course for our beloved YMCA. And the timing to do that is really opportune for a variety of reasons. We all know that we're a little more to a year into a significant rebranding that had taken a lot of time to not only rebrand, but help simplify who we are, what we stand for, and what we're doing. And that's a great time to incorporate that into our planning as we go forward. Secondly, it's been a long time since we've done this. It's 7 years since we came together for the specific purpose of identifying those future initiatives that would drive us forward. And thirdly, we are proud and pleased to have a new CEO, Alan Hofstra. And Alan, and as Alan joins the long line of people who preceded him, for nearly 130 years, this organization has served this community. And Alan's made clear that his legacy has several components, the first of which is we must live within our means. It's something we hear about all the time as we look around the world and people realize that we have to be realistic in the amount of debt one can absorb. So for that, Alan has certainly indicated that that will be a significant guiding principle for him. The second is that he will govern in a completely transparent way so that it will be open and visible. And as a part of that, he will build a team spirit that brings all of us together, branches, Metro staff, and volunteers. And I certainly sense in the months since Alan's been with us, he's well on his path to do that. But as Alan lays out those aspirational ambitions, they beg for strategic context in which they can be applied. How appropriate that we have an opportunity today to incorporate Alan's specific intentions in what we will plan and prepare for. A strategic planning process has many moving parts, a lot of components, and I'd like to take a moment to reel off those things that you're going to be encountering today. First, it requires leadership. And I'm so pleased and proud that my fellow board member and good friend Tom Miller will serve as our leader. And as you know Tom, or you will find in the coming days, he's big in stature, big in intellect, big in heart. His only slight deficit is a very small alarm clock. But as you're about to discover, Tom has a rare gift, and that gift is that he can extract and listen and hear and then articulate vital ideas that come out of a process with as many people as we have in this room, and I'm delighted and thrilled that Tom will serve in that important capacity as our leader. But there are other pieces that need to be included in a strategic planning, and one is process, and the other is facilitation. And I'm delighted that we have as our facilitators, by facilitator it's someone who's not a direct stakeholder in the outcome. We have both Janet Kafkas and Michael Weil from YUSA. Why is that so important to us? It means that we not only have a non-stakeholding objective facilitator, but we have someone whose lives are absolutely devoted to the same things we are. They understand the why. They understand our challenges, our limitations, and our aspirations. So I think we're very fortunate to have them. And by the way, the process which they're using, and they have had great experience and great success in using this process with other major urban metropolitan Ys, it works, and it works wonderfully. If the outcome of this process were to be a Polaroid snapshot of a point in time, that would resemble many strategic plans that go on the shelf. But the process which they are going to lead us through is one that will require of us that we be agile enough to be adaptive to the changing forces that work across metropolitan Y, be it branches or metro or all of us combined. So we will have the opportunity to be dynamic in the creation of this plan, and one that will give us the specific advantage of being, to continue to be relevant to all of the changing forces. When you think about it, 7 years since we did this, and can you just think about the change we've seen in the last 7 years? And I have the sense that the rate of change as we go forward will probably even be greater. So we have in this room today all the right people who are here to share the responsibility to move forward on the strategic planning process. We have a great leader in Tom Miller. We have a great process, and we have both Janet and Michael who will help us achieve our objectives. As is our tradition, we're going to begin not with music, but with an inspirational message, and I'm pleased to welcome to the podium from Palisades, and I want to make sure I pronounce it right, Carol Planger. Another great pumpkin, you can see this. Following Carol, I'll just invite Tom to come forward and we'll get underway.
Good morning. As Jim mentioned, it has been quite a long time since this association has launched a strategic planning process, and some major changes in our assumptions have taken place globally, locally, and personally. Many of life's standards and comforts we took for granted are no longer true, and still, as we gather today, we have many blessings to count, and the YMCA is fortunate to have such great leaders. At the YMCA, we strive to strengthen the foundations of community, and changes in our world can be viewed as problems we have to work around, or as opportunities to involve more people in our cause. We are not narrowly focused on gym and swim, but instead seek to improve our city's concerns in the areas of youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. These are broad categories with many possibilities. In the new book, That Used to Be Us, the authors give their thoughts about how America fell behind in the world it invented and how we can come back. They issue a challenge. Americans have plenty of experience doing big, hard things together, and what this country needs most is collective action on a large scale. So, is the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles prepared to lead collective action on a large scale? Will our new strategic plan position us to address our society's major issues? In this, I am inspired by a woman in the Bible named Esther. She was in the royal court of King Xerxes, an evil man who commanded destruction of an entire people. Esther was in a position to influence the king's command, but her life experience led her to doubt she had the power to change his mind. Her father, Mordecai, encouraged her to take action. He said, "Who knows but that you have come to this position for just a time as this?" Mordecai was right. Esther accepted her calling to be a leader and used her positive influence on King Xerxes, which saved the people and changed history. And so to all of you, I offer this challenge to lead collective action on a large scale to address the urgent issues of our society today. Who knows but that you have come to this leadership role in the YMCA for such a time as this. Thank you.
Last night it was about 11 o'clock and I was driving back from the Center Theater Group in downtown Los Angeles with my wife and some friends. And this gentleman is in the throes of starting up a car company. He has a proposal in front of the Department of Energy for $180 million. He's dealing with prostate cancer. They have a son who has had some interesting challenges in his life. And we're driving home. We're just underneath the intersection of the 110 and 10 freeway. We're in my wife's Mercedes. And all of a sudden, the windshield wipers start going, the windows start going up and down, all the lights on the car flash, and the car stops. And So I'm thinking, well, this is really pretty cool. What am I going to do with this? So we pull over, and I learned a couple of things. You cannot get a cab on a freeway. And if you have not renewed your AAA, please do. It's a great thing. But my takeaway was trust in God. And the conversation that we had last night with this gentleman didn't evolve around him trusting in God. But last night, God protected us because there were 4 of us in this car, and we could have gotten our clock clean, just as that happened. So I didn't get home until 2:30. Not a good excuse, but it's the best one I could come up with. Hi. So. I'm getting no respect. That made me think of something the other day. I had a friend in from out of town, and we were over in Westwood. And I don't know if you guys know, there's a cemetery in Westwood, right behind the AFCO Center. And I love this. Rodney Dangerfield is buried right next to Marvin Davis. And Marvin Davis has this huge crypt right on the edge of this little street inside. And on Rodney Dangerfield's tombstone, it says, "There goes the neighborhood." This morning, as I was hurrying to be on time, I read something that I thought you guys would all get a kick of, and then I'll try to get serious. Well, maybe not, but politicians and diapers have one thing in common. They should be changed regularly, and for the same reason. Well, I'm thrilled this morning to introduce a couple of great friends of the Y, the Metro Y, who are going to be doing 2 very important things for us as we go through the strategic planning process. The first one is to provide facilitation and consultation, which is grounded in best practice. These guys have done it before. As Jim mentioned, it was 7 years ago that we launched our last strategic plan. The next thing they're going to do is provide very clear and comprehensive defined time commitments and process for us. So they're going to keep us on track because, as we all know, we have a tendency to go astray. So with that, what you guys are going to do, I'd like to introduce 2 great friends. The first one is Michael Weil. Michael is, these titles, you guys have got to get new titles. Resource Director for North American Urban Group. He is the ex-CEO of Y Canada. And as we went through the Y CEO search process for the Metropolitan Y, Michael was with us through that year-long process and was a great friend and a great counselor. So Michael, if you would stand up real quick, and folks. His partner in crime for this is going to be Janet Kafkas. Janet, this is even better, Associate Resource Director, YUSA, Large Y Resource Team Urban Group. What does that mean? You don't know? Okay, good. Well, that's a good start. She is ex-Y Chicago, ex-Y Houston. She was a member of Habitat for Humanity. She's originally from Maine, and she proclaimed the first time I met her, she lived in the hood. So these 2 folks are going to be our team leaders for this whole thing. And in addition, there is a group of folks called the Strategic Task Planning Force, which is a group of folks that are from your branch boards, that are either branch execs, branch board members, Metro staff, or Metro members. And there's like 700 of us, but literally it's like 15. But if you're in the room, would you do me a favor, just stand up. These are folks that are going to be responsible for helping lead us through the process. All right, sit down. I'd like to share a little story about a gentleman named Charles Handy. Charles was the co-founder of the London Business School, and he was also an Irish author and scholar specializing in organizational behavior. In 2001, the Harvard Business School selected 3 people to write special articles. The first one was Peter Drucker, Claremont. Everybody knows who Peter is. The second one was a gentleman named Henry Mintzberg, who was the author of The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning. And the third one was Charles Handy. And Charles specialized in advising corporations as well as advising sovereigns. And he had a fascinating takeaway that I'd like to share with you. And this was a comment about both corporates and about sovereigns. They all sought to be like someone else, and many succeeded. There was no distinctive. So, for me, the challenge I think that exists for all of us is, number one, in 10 years from now, so it's now November 2021, the question is going to be, did we arrive with or without a distinctive? Was there something that made us different? And what will that extraordinarily different thing be? We have something now. What will it be in the future? So I'd like to remind each of us that our work will be deliver a working organism, not a textbook that we're going to put leather bound up on the desk that we'll all admire and look at. It's something that enables us and our successors to have a real-time framework that reminds us why we're here, that challenges us why we're here, and that encourages us. And I think if we can accomplish that, we will be wildly successful. Let me, if I may, give a couple of big picture observations and objectives. The first one is, what we're trying to do is, and I'm going to read a few things if you don't mind, align our YMCA mission and vision with practical strategies that are tied to the local environment, to the local challenges, and to the local needs. We're going to engage in a community dialogue that Michael and all of you and Janet will lead us through, that we will all participate in, that'll do three things. It'll define the perceptions of the why, it will define the perceptions of the community needs, and it will help us establish recommendations for programs that enable us to be a cause-driven organization. Second thing is that if we implement these strategies and we align the organization and we continuously adapt as the environment changes, then what we'll be able to do is create a balance of strategy and nimble, immediate response. And what we have to do is focus on that. A strategy is only as good as your ability to evaluate what's going on around you and respond to it appropriately and within the confines of the larger vision. So keep in mind, vision is long-term, strategic is evolving. November 2021, what do we want the why to look like? What is it that we all, as we think about this, we're not doing this for us, we're doing this for our grandkids, we're doing this for our successors. What are we not willing to compromise? What are those things that are absolutely not going to move? What is our core vision? What is number one? What are our driving forces? Everybody has a reason that they're in the room. Everybody has a reason that they belong to the why. Will we continue to be a cause-driven organization? There's an argument, are we a cause-driven organization today? And when we arrive in 2021, will we arrive with a distinctive? That distinctive that Charles Hamilton talked about, that everybody succeeded in being like everybody else, that is not what we want to be. So I'd like to have a couple of themes for today, if I may. Significant uncertainty. Just look around. The ECB trying to figure out whether they ought to float more bonds, the German banks trying to determine what the discount on the debt is going to be, all of the challenges. Significant change. I can't keep up with all of the different iPod, iPad, iPhone, iMe, iMy tools that are out there. It's really quite extraordinary. Community needs are changing exponentially. We can't keep up with the needs of what's going on. And that's going to be a very important part of what we do. We're going to have to define those things that we can do and those things that we can't do. There's an enduring and confused identity of the YMCA. I've been in the Y for 15 years, and it's amazing to me how the Y has changed and what I thought of the Y and what I think of the Y today. And it is a part of what, through the strategic planning process, we have to align, is understanding what is the why, what does it mean? Lastly, there is extraordinary opportunity for us, and that's the encouragement. As you look around, look at all the needs and look at the choices and the changes and the opportunities that are presented before us. Alan asked if we would sort of level set everyone in terms of where we are. And a group of us got together, 15 of us, I think, at the Katz's home on the 1st of October to sort of kickstart this whole thing. And Alan shared what he called his current reality and how we got there. And I'm just going to read plus or minus 15 things to level set everyone.
Before you start that, can you put the air conditioning vents here and the distance from my apartment?
It's hard to hear. Okay. How's that? Okay, cool. I didn't have anything worth hearing anyways. Fiscal year 2011, $2.8 million loss. Fiscal year 2010, $4.4 million loss. Fiscal year 2009, $3.4 million loss. In those 3 years, the Y lost almost $11 million. That's a fiscal reality, folks. We are internally focused, not collaborative with community. We have cash flow challenges. We are asset-based versus program-based. We're top-down versus branch-up approach to many issues. We've got a great staff. We don't have partnerships the way we should between branch and the Metro Board, and that's not a new problem. We have $200+ million in fixed assets. We have a significant endowment. We have $31 million in bonds that we're trying to determine what is the best course to solve the refinancing of those bonds because of some challenging debt covenants. There's a continuing need to assess income and expenses, service fees, charitable contributions, metro infrastructure, etc. Metro fees are 18%, including debt payments. We grew our operations versus being a cause-driven organization. We must examine the business model. So with that, what I'd like to do is say, how do we define success today? The reality is we got some trouble, we got to deal with it. And you know, everybody's sort of looking around. We had $11 million of losses. How many people in the room knew we had $11 million in losses in the last 3 years? Raise your hand. It's about a third of the people in the room. So, how should we define our success today at the meeting? Number one, together, for all of us to launch the strategic planning process aimed at developing a shared vision for the YMCA. Not individual visions, a shared vision. Number two, together, for all of us to talk about the future of the YMCA. Number three, together, for all of us to feel a part of the larger Y organization, regionally, nationally, globally. Number four, together for us to build a culture whose foundation is based on trust and transparency. Those are new words for the YMCA. I think Alan has brought a breath of freshness, of humility, and the entire staff is resonating to all of that. And the changes, frankly, that I've seen over the course of the last year is extraordinary. Alan, God bless you. Number five, together, we will ask the tough questions. There's nothing we can't ask. Number six, together, for all of us to create a collective sense of ownership of the strategic planning process. We're all in this thing together. As Alan challenged us 2 months ago, just consider us all D'Artagnan, all for one and one for all, and all for the kids and all for the community. Number seven, together, for all of us to understand our roles in both the larger and smaller context of the YMCA. Number eight, together, for all of us to develop a robust list of who to speak with within our communities. Who are the community stakeholders? This isn't going to be about who we do know, it's about who we don't know. Because who we don't know are going to give us perceptions and they're going to give us opportunities, and frankly they may give us financial support. So the challenge for us isn't to go to who we do know, it's to go to who we don't know, and to be willing to listen. I'm sure everybody's grandmother had this saying, but there's a reason that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Together, for all of us to develop an ability to articulate the needs of our communities. I know one of the challenges is that we don't know what the needs are. We think we have a good idea. Through this process, we will understand what the needs are, and we will develop programs that are tied to the needs of the community. Last, together, for all of us to engage in a shared process that will enable us to shape the future of the YMCA and what outcomes we hope and pray to produce in the coming years. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way. Michael, Janet, showtime. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Great. Get a Chevy, Tom. It's a great line. Well, I think that's one of the things we're going to remember by the strategic planning session here. It's great to be with you. I'm Michael Weil, and as Tom sort of said, it's hard to know what I do, but I'm Senior Vice President of YUSA, looking after the large Y resources that Janet and I are part of. And you know, I want to say that it's great to be back here in Los Angeles. I spent most of during the search process for Alan, I was here probably almost on a once a month basis, coming back and forth between Chicago and other places here to Los Angeles. And I have to tell you that you should be so very proud of the volunteers you have here in Los Angeles. I don't think I've seen in any YMCA I've worked at no finer a group of volunteers that I got to know so well on the search committee. Jim Ellison, chair of your board, was also chair of the search committee. Tom was a part of it. Tony was a part of it. Just an amazing group of people who, what struck me the most, and I think that this is in your bones here, it's part of your DNA here in Los Angeles in the Y, is how they could sort of take their work and corporate hats off, or whatever they were doing in the search committee, but really try to delve into what kind of leader do we want to be for this cause-driven organization. A group of volunteers who are passionate about the cause of the YMCA and care for it so deeply. And it very much impressed me to no end, to be honest with you. So the chance to come and work with you, for Janet and I, to work with you here in Los Angeles is because of the level of engagement you have, that you all have, both volunteers and staff. What I want to tell you about is just quickly what we are. It's a large Y resource group. We work with the largest YMCAs across the United States. About 4 years ago, Hasneel Nickel, who's the national CEO of YUSA, wanted to start a group. We had done sort of, went out across the country to listen to what are the needs of YMCAs in terms of how we support Ys. Because being part of the Federation of YUSA, you pay fair share support, but one of our responsibilities is what can we do to support YMCAs across the United States. And we were hearing from some of the largest Ys, you know, the largest not just by budget, but in urban centers across the United States, that we needed to find a new approach to how we support them. And so from that, about 3.5 years ago, we created a new group called this Large YMCA Resource Group that has association resources responsibility. And our effort is to try to relate much more to these larger Ys. Not that the other Ys are not as important, that all YMCAs are equally important, but there's certain complexity to larger Ys, like Los Angeles, like San Francisco, like Silicon Valley here in California. So we created this new group, and I had been the CEO up in Canada, and I had been a former urban group CEO in Montreal, and asked to come down and sort of work with this group to sort of design a system where we could support these larger Ys, to provide a more relevant service. And one of the things that we decided to do in those association resources is everything from CEO search support, like we did here in Los Angeles a while ago, but also around strategic planning. And you have to know that many Ys, the larger Ys in the United States, were not really using YMCA for strategic planning support. And it's good to know that out of these 90 Ys that Janet and I work with amongst another group of members in our team, those are Metro 30 and mid-major Ys as well as the urban Ys. We're now starting to get more and more work. We've worked with Dallas, Philadelphia, San Francisco. Janet has provided excellent support to those Ys. We're working with you here in Los Angeles now. We're also doing Boston's strategic plan. And I think it's very important for us to be able to do this work for a couple of reasons. why it is the right time, I think, to use YUSA, and obviously you'll be the judge of whether that was the right decision in a couple of months. But right now, with the new brand initiative, I think it's critical to make sure that what you're doing here in Los Angeles is very much aligned to the brand and the cause of the YMCA, our strengthening of foundations of community, youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. We've got a lot of resources now at YUSA working on bringing the brand to life. And it's not just about a logo. In fact, the logo is probably the least important thing about our new branding. It's about our message. It's about how we interact with people every day. How people experience the YMCA is the critical thing as you go into a strategic plan, to say that we're actually delivering on the things we say we're going to do in strengthening the foundations of community. I guess the other piece is that we've also worked in creating a new model of strategic planning. And it's called real-time strategic planning, where YUSA has engaged with La Piana Consulting, which are based out in San Francisco. And they've developed a model of what they call real-time strategic planning. And it's funny, but Tom talked about 3 people who Harvard asked about, to make commentary on strategic planning. Henry Mintzberg, who I know a little bit, he teaches at McGill University, which is the home city where I'm originally from, Montreal at McGill. He wrote a book called Real-Time Strategic Planning. He's one of the gurus of strategic planning in the world. In fact, was just listed as one of the most influential business thinkers, intellectual thinkers, just by a new group in the world. 10 most influential business thinkers. Henry Mintzberg actually calls strategic planning a bit of an oxymoron term. That to be strategic sometimes means, you have to throw your plan aside. But you need the plan to be strategic, but don't let the plan become unstrategic. Don't be so tied to your plan that you're no longer strategic. And that's why I think YUSA decided to engage in this real-time strategic planning. That the process is about looking at what is our situation, what are the influences that Tom so well described right now in this crazy world we're living in. How do we adapt to those things on a regular basis, and how do we make sure that our Ys are nimble and flexible to respond to these challenging times? And frankly, I think that's what's made the Y so enduring over 150 years around the world, is this piece about, we've been here, how many organizations have been in existence for over 150 years? It's obviously because we know how to be responsive, we know how to adapt, we know how to be flexible, which is why it's great that you're in Los Angeles here now, taking the time to do this and think about this at this critical time in your great city. So I want to tell you that we're so excited to be here, to be part of this strategic planning process. And now I want to introduce Janet, who I work with very closely. Janet is an incredibly bright mind, who's a colleague of mine at YUSA, who's becoming one of our best facilitators, if not our best facilitator of strategic planning processes. And so I'm very pleased to be working with her. Janet is passionate about the cause of the Y. She can at times be critical of the Y, but I think that that's one of the things about Janet that's so helpful, because she's always working to find an answer and a solution to an issue or to a problem. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Janet Kafkas. Janet.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to echo Michael, I've had the chance over the years to do some work in LA. So we did Project Impact with staff a few years ago. So it kind of feels a little like old home week to me, which is the great gift of the Y, that you get to go home when you're visiting Ys that are nowhere near where you live. So I come from Chicago. That's where my home is. And we're going to jump into this work today. If you can hang in with us for another about 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to do some introduction to the framework. But then we're going to hand it back to you. So no pressure, but you're actually going to have to work today. So if you weren't prepared for that, that's just a little bit of a warning. This process, as Michael mentioned, we've been doing real-time strategic planning for, you may not have said this, for about 2 years now. And one of the differences is that it is fundamentally based on the principle that our world is changing incredibly quickly. We have a number of Ys that did their last strategic plan in 2007, right? So they did their planning process in 2007. How long do you think it was relevant, the strategies that they came up with so diligently? 2 weeks, maybe 9 months. Like by the time they hit 2008 or 2009, people were like, what? Capital campaign? Like that's just not gonna happen. And so how do we, to Tom's point, how do we have a vision that's clear enough but strategies that are nimble enough and relevant enough that we aren't tied to the actual document. That's not where our focus is. Our focus is on the vision we're striving to achieve and the strategies that are most relevant to meet the pressing needs that are aligned with the mission of the organization. So, one of my favorite quotes, and I use this in lots of other cities, it actually comes from LA, which I discovered the last time I was here. This is from the mother of your mayor. Is it Virgosa? Is that, yeah. So now I don't know why his mom felt the need to share this quote with him. This was the counsel she gave him, that you need to declare your purpose, not victory. And when I saw that quote for the first time, I was struck by it. It felt really appropriate to us in the Y. Now, I'm going to ask you to use your loud day camp voices, because we're going to do some group participation here. And we're not going to run around with the van on mic. That's just dangerous in a room this tight. Why do you think it matters that we declare our purpose and not our victory? How does that apply to us in the Y? It's never over. What else is a consequence of? Yeah, we're looking ahead instead of back.
When you declare your purpose, you're talking about the people who can serve and declare victory, you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, when you're talking about your purpose, you're declaring what you're headed, who you're in service to, who the people are that you're called to meet needs for. When you're talking about your victory, it really is about us. I don't know, I'm sure it never happened in LA, but we had a number of plans in other parts of the country that their ultimate goal was to be seen as a leader in blah, blah, blah. Like that was the ultimate goal of the organization. Now that's pretty different than declaring a purpose that's about how do we want the community and society to be different because of the work that we're doing. And that's a hard call. Why else do you think it might affect us if all we declare is our victory? Yeah, the victory, we're done, right? We don't need to do anything else. We're all done, which is a critical part, right? If we spend all our time declaring victory, why in the world would I donate money to the Y? Right? If I'm done, if you guys are done, there's no reason for me to get engaged and involved. And so purpose really opens the door for people to join us in the work that we're doing, which I think it's a powerful concept. In the Y, we've spent a ton of time declaring our victory. And I don't mean that just here, but collectively as a movement, we've been very driven to declare what we've done, which is important, but in service to the purpose that we have, not as the ultimate thing. So I'm going to share with you, if you're not familiar, this is Notre Dame. I actually had the chance to go for the first time in April, and ironically though, this metaphor has been powerful for me in the Y for my whole career. So I have about 12 years in the YMCA, and my first job was as the director of the National Innovation Conference. Now it happened one time. It was with the Chicago Y. My job got eliminated the day the conference ended, so it was clearly a brilliant success. Yeah, we love the Y. You can have an enduring career in the Y, even if things don't appear to be going well all the time. But we had a speaker there, and his name is Bill Shore. If you're familiar with the Charge Against Hunger, if you have an American Express card, the Charge Against Hunger, right now it's the No Kid Hungry campaign that you may have seen commercials for. It's for an organization called Share Our Strength. And Bill Shore started that organization as an anti-hunger effort. But he took a sabbatical and visited cathedrals across Europe. And one of his reflections was, what was it about the builders of the cathedrals that allowed them to cast a vision for something that people would invest their time, their talent, their treasure in, that they were never going to see done? And when I heard that question posed, I was like, oh, that's kind of like the Y, right? Like those of you who've done childcare, how many of you have worked with kids in the Y? You probably, unfortunately, won't get to see all of them reach their brilliant selves. Like, you get them when they're 7 and when they're 13, but not necessarily when they're the citizen that knows how to show up in a way that is values-based. Because your work is in service to something you aren't going to necessarily see the end of. And that's hard for us. So how do we, in this work that we're starting on right now, how do we cast a vision that's big enough? Because how long did it take to build a cathedral? How long? 200, hundreds of years. Like I think Notre Dame was 400 years. So I was just, as I said, I was in Paris for the first time in April, and I went into the cathedral, and some of you may have been there, but you look up and you don't have the sense like, oh my gosh, they had no idea what they're doing. It took them so long to build it. Like that's not the first thing that crosses your mind. Now I've been in some YMCAs, if I'm honest, where there's a 150-foot long hallway to the racquetball court, right? That's all it goes to, because the addition added on some concrete passageway to nowhere. And there's doorways that go places. Like, we don't always look like we knew where we were headed when we get there. Now, that's okay, but there is something to be said for being very intentional about taking the time to articulate our vision for where we're headed. So that when we get there, it doesn't look like it all got jammed onto each other. Like, and we have to figure out what in the world do you do with 27 racquetball courts in the basement of the, I worked for the Houston Y. We had literally, I think, 40 racquetball courts. No one needs 40 racquetball courts, just to be clear. Like, you don't, so what in the world do you do with a downtown building with 40 racquetball courts? When no one plays, I mean, there were like 5 members that played racquetball still. So there were lots of other things that needed a purpose, because they didn't have a purpose. There wasn't an overarching vision for that. So hold that in your head. Part of this process, and each of you, one of the things I love about LA is you have a strong sense of your autonomy. You own that. I actually am beginning to believe that's a California strength. Like in the Midwest, we're very community oriented. On the West Coast, like, you own the local community you serve, and that is one of your greatest strengths. So each of you who serve on a board in here, you are supposed to love your local Y. That is supposed to be where your passion and your heart is. At the same time, you have to have a vision for what the collective is doing, right? We each do. So what do we give up of our individual stuff in service to that collective vision? Because the fact of the matter is, you can do more together than you can do individually. Like, it's just the way it works. And so what are we going to give up in service to the vision that's going to allow us to move forward? So this real-time planning process, so hold that question in your head. What are you going to give up? I know it's a motivational way to start this day, isn't it? What are you going to have to sacrifice? That question's coming at the end. So you get a little couple hours to answer that. This is just a picture so you get a sense of what planning used to look like. How many of you have done a strategic plan with the Y or with your organization? So basically, I'm going to promise you that you are going to be somewhat disappointed with this process. Like, it's not going to look like it's looked in the past. So you will not like some part of it. I can pretty much guarantee you. That's my commitment to you, is that we'll disappoint some expectation you have of this process. Because in the past, we planned, right? And then we execute, and we plan again. And the premise of this process is that we actually live in a world where the external environment and strategy formation need to be happening all the time. So back to Tom's beginning comments, we constantly need to be aware of what's going on around us. Because we shouldn't be surprised when a need pops up in our community. I don't know about you, but I ran a branch in I ran it my second job after I got fired from the first one. Was with a branch still in Chicago, running their job training and economic development branch. And so I had a $3 million branch with 27 government contracts, which, if you have a picture of hell in your mind, it's pretty close to what that looks like. And we were just doing stuff. We weren't looking at the external environment. The only external environment we were paying attention to at all was there a grant available that would give us money to do something. It didn't actually matter if there was a need for it. It didn't matter if we know how to do it. Like, it just mattered that there was money on the table. This is saying we constantly need to have in our head that vision, right? That purpose of where we're headed, and the reality on the ground, and what is the right strategy to address that need given our vision and purpose as an organization. And that's not easy to do. Like, there's some discipline, because we get used to doing what we're good at. This requires that we don't even get that 3-year window to hold on to our expertise of whatever initiative we picked. We constantly need to be looking at how are we interacting and serving and meeting the needs in the environment, while not sacrificing the soul of the organization, as Andy describes, by becoming like everyone else. So we're not worshiping the God of relevance, necessarily, but we want to meet the needs that our mission and purpose call us to meet. Like, that has to determine the kind of things we want to be relevant in. And this process is hard, I'll be totally honest. We probably, on our team, have done 20 of these so far, with the largest 90 associations. And no one has actually, in the stage of implementing this, to say it. So, like, we've gotten through the planning process, but this is a hard thing to hold with open hands, the things that we're saying we're going to do as an organization and how we move forward. It's hard for volunteers, for those of you who are offering leadership from an association perspective, from a branch level, but it's also hard for staff. Like, how do you be nimble enough How do you risk being a little bit incompetent in some areas that maybe the vision is calling us to step into that are a little scary? Because frankly, we haven't been showing up in those places in the right kinds of ways. And hopefully this planning process is going to press us to the edge of going, what are we being called to do to meet the needs that our mission calls us to meet? So this is just a snapshot to hold in your head. There's no quiz at the end, so we'll review any of these pieces when we get there. We just want to give you a snapshot of how, when you think about this whole process, where the different roles are in it. So if you look at the top of this pyramid, you see the organizational goals and strategies. That really is the responsibility of both the governing board, the Metro board, but also the strategic planning committee. So again, if you're on the committee, can you raise your hand so folks can see? If you have problems with the things or you have issues with the plan when it's done, that's who you find, just in case it's so unclear. But they have a stewardship responsibility for that organizational level. The organization says, from a Metro board position, they have responsibility for the strategic direction of the organization as a whole. Now, what often happened in the past, though I'm sure it didn't happen here, is that plans got done, and then they kind of got tossed at branches to implement. Again, like I said, I'm sure it wasn't here. I'm sure everyone's all good, and you did that all nicely and played together. This process says there's actually work that belongs to each different segment of the organization. So once the organizational vision once we're clear on that, and you're all in the room, which I have to be honest, Michael and I were commenting, this doesn't happen everywhere, just in case you're wondering. Volunteers and staff don't gather like this on a regular basis everywhere. And so the chance to have the right conversation about the right kind of work is a unique thing. You have a chance, everyone in the room has a chance to influence the organizational direction of this plan. But then we go to programmatic and operational. And that's where the work uniquely in this process goes back to the branches and staff, which, not to disappoint the Metro board, but they don't get to plan Zumba classes or after-school programs or advocate for the pool at their favorite branch in the association, because that work belongs to you all who are in the room. The work of the programmatic and operational stuff really it's the purview of staff and the local volunteers at the branch level. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like as we go through this process. So that you can hold this, we're aware that all of these pieces are important, but there's an order of things. We have to be clear on what the collective vision is before we can give the work back. Does that make sense? So that we're not all running in different tracks. We're headed in a common direction in a way that's locally relevant, yet collectively intentional. I talk fast, I'm from Maine. Michael doesn't travel with me very often, and that's the critique I get, is that I talk fast. So if you have questions, just raise your hand. We can expound on any of these pieces a little bit more if we need to. This planning cycle is just a snapshot of some of the pieces, and I'm going to just highlight a couple of these so you have a sense of what we're really holding kind of as the primary components of this process. This has a really neat little pointer, but the room is so big, I can't see it. So, you see it? Oh, look at that. So we're going to spend a bunch, the committee, and it'll come back and get tested at the staff and branch level. We actually come up with an impact statement. We spend some time thinking about if all of this goes as well as you could possibly hope. So Tom's vision of 2021, that what will we see in the community if everything goes as well as we could possibly hope? So it's not about us. It's less about the why. So there's no, we'll be a leader in blah, blah, blah. You'll have to fight me to get that one in your impact statement. It might be a necessary means, but what we're ultimately about over here is the impact on the people we're serving. How will the community be better, stronger, different because of the work that you're committing to? Because part of what people need is that cathedral of purpose, right? They need to know why this work matters, what it's in service to over the long run. The second piece that we're going to do is a strategic advantage. Now, in the why, we like to say we're not about competition. So this is the non-competitive version of a competitive advantage. So we call it a strategic advantage because it makes us feel better. But what it is the exercise of identifying our unique strength and DNA component in the community. And so I love Charles Handy as an author, so if you need some good reading on a plane, Charles Handy's a great read, but Tom's quote has been percolating in my head because part of the strategic advantage exercise is it's the antithesis of what the situation he described. If we become like everyone else, we give away our uniqueness. We give away our unique value. And when we talk about a strategic advantage, it's really that thing that it's the DNA of an organization. So I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and we're all very different. Like, I work for the Y, which doesn't make sense to anyone in my family. Like, my brothers are teachers, but they're elementary school teachers, which makes them a little weird to begin with. And then my sister's a chemistry teacher, so she's very weird. Like, but when you meet us, if you saw the 4 of us, you would know that there's a common DNA that we share. Like, we show up in a way that demonstrates that we're family. And that's our aspiration with the strategic advantage, is that wherever you go in the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles, you would be showing up in a way that represents and demonstrates and brings to life the DNA that you collectively own and value. Now, it will look different in Westchester than it will in Gardenia. No, somewhere. The challenge of learning all your branch names. We'll have it done. Michael and I will be down by the time we're done with the planning process. Time to wrap it up. But you want to know that you're the why, no matter where you show up, even though what you do will be different, and it should be, because your community needs are unique to you. But people should be able to tell that you're the why, that thing. So this strategic advantage becomes, how do we articulate what that common DNA is that we all share and are going to give attention to and nurture? The third thing that we focus on is the strategy screen here, which is essentially what it sounds like. Like, we come up with a list of questions that help us screen potential strategies. So that when we're thinking about a new opportunity, we can run it through the screen, we can ask the questions of it, so that we don't drive the strategic vision off a cliff. But that we also aren't clamping down so tightly on a program director or a branch and telling them exactly what they have to do. We kind of set the parameters that say, you get freedom, you get to be innovative, you get to be creative, but you get to do it within these parameters. This has been a really powerful tool because it both allows us to be congruent, but creative and have some autonomy at the same time. And then finally, as you'll see on the agenda, we'll get to big questions later today. Part of the premise of real-time planning is that you don't do planning just because you hit the end of it, like because the date on the binder ran out. I know, that's the common reason why we do it in the past. One of my other favorite quotes is, leadership is about disappointing people at a rate they can handle. You can use that one. It's a really great, it works in numerous situations. So we're trying to disappoint ourselves at a rate we can handle, that we need to develop strategies when we have a big question. Like, when there's a question as an association or a branch that we need to wrestle with, that's when we do strategy development. In service to that collective vision, which is durable, which results in you building Notre Dame and not a shack outhouse in the backyard. Like, so you need to have both of those things. But the big questions should drive our strategy formation. Are there any questions? This is the snapshot. Like I said, no, don't tell anyone else. You just got the entire 6-month planning process in about 15 minutes. Should be all good. Any questions on these? I know this is super high level and fast. Great. So the question was, are we talking about vision as a starting point or strategies? And I would say at this point in the game, you're talking vision. Because in the same way that we talk about the cause of the organization, if we aren't clear about what all of the strategies are in service to, we just have activity. And so the exercise of articulating our collective vision for how we want things to be different. So just as an example, when the Dallas Y went through this process, they articulated their impact statement as, we want the community, people in the community, to be active, engaged, and healthy. We want them to care for their own well-being and care for others. And we want the Y to be a treasured part of their families, relationships, and communities. So it's simple. It's not where you're getting the measurable metrics. That comes later. But it does say everything we do is about active, engaged, healthy, caring for one another, and the Y being fundamentally connected to the heart of the community. And so that is making them screen out certain kinds of things that they might pick as a strategy if they didn't have that picture of where they were headed. Anything else?
Do you have any examples of organizations that have worked on the nonprofit which successfully?
Yeah, the question is, do we have any examples of organizations that have done it successfully? Yes. Like, there are organizations that are doing this process. I would say this will test every ounce of commitment to process without it just being for process sake in the organization. Even if you talk to La Piana, they will say the distraction for people is that they want something concrete and they get tied to what they're used to. I think the place we've seen it translate so far, now this is 2 years into it, so we don't have a long track record with YMCAs, but is the idea of big questions. Like, how do you consistently ask big questions, not just around planning, but in a general sense, like when you start a board meeting, are you posing? Are there big questions that we need to put on the table and really wrestle with as an organization? So it's an experiment, and yes, they have organizations that have done it, and yes, we're still waiting to see how it plays out in the live, would be the...
I just wanted to respond to that question there. I'm in education, and some of the most successful reforms in our institutions of learning are using this same model.
Yep.
And they're finding it very successful. Now, how would that look in education? Well, that's moving from an old-fashioned model of learning that we established years ago to a more collaborative and a focus on more teachers solving the problems of learning in their institutions versus the government or federal government or decision-making people deciding what is successful at the society. Teachers should know better than the outside external people.
Yeah, it's a great example. Like this process, and I think just so you have some expectation, will be much messier in the midst and a much higher degree of ownership when we get through that part of it, if that makes sense. So you kind of sacrifice the neatness of it for the sense that this will be all of your plan when we get to the point where it's time to execute strategies. And ownership is that's a complicated thing to build. You can't just tell someone they have ownership of something. And so that's part of our commitment to this process as well. I'm going to press the pause button. We're going to move through a couple different exercises now. So we're going to begin to toss this back to you to do some work at your tables. So I'm going to ask Michael to do this next.
Ask whether it be people who are working in childcare or in our camps, in our healthy living programs, our programs that are in economic development or employment or youth work. It's how we act every day and to be a cause. You know, YMCAs have a charitable registration. And to have a charitable registration from IRS, when we first started as YMCAs, is an honor. It's also a responsibility we have to deliver in our charitable mission. Sometimes we forget that word, charity. You know, I've met YMCAs, I can remember a number of years ago, I think the tide is shifting, who would rather call themselves a business as opposed to a charity. Well, we're not a business. Yeah, we operate maybe under some of the principles of being like a business, but we're charities. And we're given that right to act as a charity by the IRS, but we have to live up to those responsibilities of being a charity every day, whether it's here in Los Angeles or in New York. And so what is it to be a charity? Well, it's about cause. You know, what is our purpose? And what are the, you know, to give that charitable purpose, we have to make a difference in people's lives. And we felt that, you know, over the number of years in the Y, we kind of got sort of focused on doing the business and becoming the business of the business, and we focused on the business. And I think there was a reason for that. That, you know, we had come through, many YMCAs in North America had come through a period of time where we were struggling financially, we had older facilities, and so we realized that we needed to become stronger financially, we needed to become more sustainable. But in that effort, kind of the effort sort of took over our language, it took over how we acted, it took over how we behaved, and how we presented ourselves to our community. And so in that effort to build new buildings, to get a stronger financial model, we kind of forgot a little bit what was our purpose, and what is our cause, and what are all those things supposed to be in service for. And so as YUSA began the new brand launch a couple of years ago, we heard from leaders across the country who were sort of saying, we're not really sure what the Y stands for. Well, what are you really about? They had a good feeling about the Y. But other than the good feeling, they couldn't really describe it very well. And in our own membership, we did a study at YCANA and YUSA, I remember, because I was the CEO of YCANA at the time, where we asked our membership in both countries, our own members who come on a regular basis, whether we were a charity or not, and what was our cause. 3 out of 10 knew we were a charity. In other words, 7 out of 10 did not know about what our purpose and our charitable purposes were. So this is a really critical piece that we're now focusing on at YUSA, and I know you live by here in Los Angeles. What we want to do is show you that we've got characteristics about what we believe a cause-driven organization and cause-driven leadership is about. And we've defined some at YUSA, but we want to have an exercise. This is where we're going to put you to work soon, right after this video, for you at your table groups to talk about what would you think are some of the characteristics of cause-driven organizations and cause-driven leadership. But to start that, we want to show you this quick clip that we're using of Steve Tarver, who is the CEO of the Louisville Lab. Because that's the way he says it, Louisville. And we spent, Janet and I and our team, our last team retreat was in Louisville. And it was really something else to see about how they're living the mission and how they're describing it. And one of the things we're doing in getting across the message about how to, to really bring to light our cause message and our living the cause, what we call living our cause, this interview has been very useful to sort of demonstrate some of the characteristics. So this is sort of a warm-up for you to get you warmed up for your table group exercises, where we want you to identify at your tables what you believe are the characteristics of being a cause-driven organization. Make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
What happened? Press the button.
The top of the mountain for me is the mission, and we talk about the mission in our organization quite a bit. And so trying to make that whole spirit, mind, and body thing come alive in the lives of people through the eyes